Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Power Retail webinar session. My name is Grant Arnott. I'm the publisher of Power Retail, and I'll be introducing our guest speakers very shortly. Before that introduction, I just want to run through some quick housekeeping. Firstly, the toilets. I hope you know where they are because this is a webinar and I'm not going to be able to help you. Mobile phones, turn them to silent. I can't ridicule you if it goes off because I won't hear it, but that's beside the point. You want to pay attention. It's going to be a great session. Post any questions you have to the dialog box in the sidebar. We'll let our speakers complete the presentation and then we'll field your questions at the end of the session. It's a jam-packed session ahead. You're going to take away. Expectations have never been higher for retailers. Delivering a consistent shopping experience through online channels, mobile technology and social media is not an option, it's an obligation. Yet recent research shows that 47% of Australian consumers are unhappy with the digital experiences they receive, and this has a significant impact on their loyalty and advocacy and a company's revenue generation. In this webinar session today, Jennifer Arnold, Head of Marketing at SAP, and Stuart O'Neill, Retail Expert at SAP Hybris, are going to enlighten you as to what Australian consumers want from the digital experiences provided by best-known retail brands. You'll learn how to explore how leading organisations are innovating the digital experience to know and engage their customers better. Understand how good and bad digital experiences influence customer loyalty and advocacy, and discover how your customers' digital knowledge and social media usage influences their digital experience. And you're also going to receive a free copy of this report just by attending the webinar, so thanks for your time today. As I said, we'll conduct some Q&A at the end of the session, but you can fire questions anytime via the dialog box. And now I'm going to hand over to Jennifer and Stuart to take you through how to align the digital retail experiences you offer with what Australian consumers want. Over to you guys.
Thank you very much, Grant, and good morning, everyone. So I don't need to tell everybody on the phone that retailers know the importance of the customer experience. Really, the industry was built on it. But now that digital experience really is becoming one of the most important aspects of the overall customer experience. And for many retailers, really the only interaction that they have and the relationship they have with their consumers these days is in the digital world. There really isn't anything that exists that's the traditional retail environment anymore. We've gone way beyond pure bricks and mortar. And those who've maintained that pure bricks and mortar presence really are starting to struggle as we start to see disruptors enter the marketplace, and the more and more social and digital people become, and the more global the retail marketplace becomes as well. So when we talk about the digital retail experience, we're not just talking about front-end websites or online shopping interactions. We're talking about the digital experience at every point of the customer journey. This not only extends to mobile platforms, you're also looking at interactions via email, chat, social environments, and even talking about the digital experience you might be giving in the store. And we're not just talking about the shopping. This digital customer experience also extends right through the journey to ongoing service and support. So many retailers have been investing heavily into this digital customer experience, as other industries. But what the research that we've just done shows is that brands in Australia are still alienating some consumers due to the poor digital experiences that they're delivering. So today we'll discuss why that could be. We'll talk about the impact that it's having on retailers' businesses. We'll talk about what can be done to improve the Australian digital experience. And we'll talk a little bit about best practices of those that we're seeing are getting it right, not necessarily here, but also overseas. But first, we're going to look at why this digital customer experience is proving to be such a challenge for retailers and other organizations. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that consumers today are much harder to engage than ever before. Grant, we go on to the next slide. So, Stuart, can you take us through what that customer experience looks like and why there is such a challenge?
Sure. I think we'll all agree that the buying approach or the way customers engage with brands these days has changed and fundamentally changed forever. And what we see through this slide is we see a typical buying journey where we're talking about the typical pipeline and model where you build awareness, you build interest, and then there's normally an action. However, what we're seeing is the interaction with brands these days occurs through multiple channels. And so what this slide is showing is a typical buying process where actually someone was purchasing a mobile phone. where they started off with a certain amount of research online, where they started to look at pricing and availability and social interactions, where they started to look at consideration. They started to look at their customer center, maybe called up a customer center to find out availability, etc., and taking it all the way through to finally making that purchase. And what we see is that controlling the customer journey is not one of those things that most brands can actually manage these days. It's about making sure that you are consistent across all of these channels and all of these interaction points. Because at the end of the day, it's all about being the quickest and easiest to do business with. And that means being consistent across all of these channels and making sure that you influence every single channel and that you get a consistent experience each time you touch one of these channels. So what we're seeing is advocacy is a huge influencer in terms of where we sit. Social media is driving this advocacy, is driving this knowledge awareness, and we need to provide a consistent experience across the entire brand, no matter where they touch your brand. So essentially, all this slide is saying is this is one person's buying journey, this is one person's where they've interacted with these channels, but we're saying one customer, many journeys, infinite possibilities, no matter how often they touch your brand. And you need to be able to make sure that the experience is consistent and that you're influencing all of these channels to be successful and drive customer experience. Over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Stuart. So you can see from the diagram how many of those channels are digital these days. And, you know, as Stuart was saying, it really is that omni-channel experience, that consistency across all of them. So if you do find that the experience is falling down in these social channels, it's going to impact every part of the brand experience and the buying experience your customer is going to have. So we wanted to understand how Australian brands are succeeding in addressing this challenge of engaging the customer across this journey and at so many different points, and understanding what is the quality of experience that they're receiving on the digital platforms. And when we looked at the available research in the market on this topic, what we realized is, firstly, there was very little focus specifically on the Australian market. A lot of it also just focused on the online shopping experience, not on this end-to-end journey. And it also tended to focus specifically on websites and mobile platforms. So very little that also looked at the digital in-store experience, the ongoing support experience as well, a little bit around social platforms, but nothing that was really truly integrated across the end-to-end journey. A lot of it also focused on the technology rather than on the business outcomes as well. And it didn't really delve into experiences with specific industries or brands. So when we were going out and we were talking to our customers about how do we improve the digital customer experience that they're providing, we didn't have the right information to back up that conversation and help prove some of the points that really explained why that end-to-end experience, that omni-channel experience, was so critical. So we went out and commissioned an independent research agency to explore this, to really get that Australian customer view right across the board. So they went and sampled 3,000 Australians over the age of 18 years, and we got them to talk about 7,000 total individual company ratings and experiences that they'd had in digital platforms. And we got them to nominate up to 6 industries that they had that experience across. So it was an online survey, but what we did is then dig into some of those topics a little bit more with focus groups as well to tease out the kind of real anecdotal evidence of what they were talking about and the nuances there too. So what we'll start sharing with you is what is the impact of the digital experience that they're achieving. We'll talk about the business impact that has, and we'll talk about the attributes that they say contribute to having a delightful digital experience as well. So we looked at this a little bit like a net promoter score, where we got them to give a rating around all of those 7,000 individual interactions that they had and rate it from 1 to 10, where a dissatisfied rating was a 1, 2, or 3, and a delighted rating was an 8, 9, or 10. And we wanted to give it an index score. So as Grant said in his introduction, it was a negative number, but because we wanted to understand not only how different industries were performing against each other, we also know how different brands are performing against each other competitively in the marketplace, but we also wanted to track performance over time. So as organizations become much more sophisticated at delivering digital experiences and it becomes much more of a focus and they're starting to invest more in it, and they make changes in their business processes to enable it, we wanted to see whether or not that was truly having an impact on how consumers were perceiving that at their end. Okay. So we went and we gave ratings, as I said, almost a net promoter score rating, and what I'll share with you now is what that industry view looks like for those ratings. So Grant, could you go on to the next slide? And what we found surprised us, because what we were expecting to see is for those organizations in industries where they're B2C industries, like the retail industry, like banking, like insurance, where we know that organizations have been putting significant amount of focus and investments into these areas, we didn't expect to see negative scores. And you can see that really they are quite negative. If you look at these in terms of net promoter scores, what we do is we take the delightful experiences and we subtract the dissatisfied experiences to come up with the score. And so you can see there's no industry that actually rated a positive score. And in fact, when we looked at the individual brands that were rated, there were about 30 brands that were nominated by the consumers where they rated the digital experience those brands had given them. Only one organization had a positive score, and that was Suncorp Insurance. So again, that really surprised us. Again, no banks, no retailers. Those where there had been significant investment rated a positive score. And as we go a little bit further along, we'll share with you some of the things that Suncorp has been doing that we suggest it has led them to having that one positive score in the rating. So as you would expect to see, some of the more transactional industries like utilities rate a little bit lower. But when we're having discussions with them as we share this research, one of the things we're finding is they are also seeing the need to improve this digital customer experience as their markets become more competitive and become more retail-like. They're realizing that that purely transactional relationship that they had previously no longer suffices. You also have to consider that you have to look at the consumer holistically. So they're not just a consumer of retail goods, they're also a consumer of online banking, they're also telco customers, utility customers, really they stretch across all of these areas. And what they expect is the same quality of digital experience they're getting with one type of supplier is what they expect to get from another. We're even seeing that when it comes to government organizations now. You're getting very used to having a better digital experience when it comes to online shopping and accessing different services. And so now they're starting to expect that even when they're interacting with government bodies, they get that too. So it's putting a lot of pressure on organizations in every industry to focus on this. But as I said, particularly for retailers, because in many cases that purely is the only kind of relationship that you have with the consumer. Globally, there's also a lot of pressure coming because many consumers are also global consumers of goods and information and services. And the expectation now is that Australian retailers are able to provide that same quality of service that some of the large overseas or even niche retailers provide. So what it all nuts down to as well is why should retailers care about how consumers are rating them and the digital experience they're receiving? Is providing a digital experience that's just good enough or as good as my immediate competitors, is that enough? And what the research suggests is that that is not the case. There actually is direct business impact on the digital experience being provided. Okay. Stuart, did you have anything that you wanted to add there?
No, I think I would agree that what we're seeing is that where you would expect, obviously, far higher net promoter scores or far higher customer experience ratings within specific industries in Australia, we're just not seeing, and that's what the research came through and proved. And that relates back to how we're seeing most of our industries perform against our global competitors, where they have made huge strides and huge steps towards being competitive in this space, and where they have understood that customer experience is absolutely core, and if they start to put the customer at the front and center of everything that they do, then they actually have to start to consider how all of those channels influence that customer experience. And I'll hand back to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Grant, can we go on to the next slide? So what we'll look at now is what is that business impact of the quality of the digital experiences being provided. And as I said, one of the things we can see is that there is a direct impact on how consumers act based on the digital experience they receive. So we asked them about advocacy. We wanted to understand if the quality of the digital experience that was provided to them had an impact on whether or not they would be willing to recommend a brand to a friend or a family member or a colleague or so on. So again, we use this Net Promoter Score model to do that. And really why we keep coming back to this NPS is because more and more it's becoming a key indicator of the health of a business and is being tracked very closely and from management teams. And we also know that from other market research that NPS scores do relate directly back to business performance. So for instance, Bain & Company has said that NPS leaders tend to grow at more than twice the rate of their competitors. So again, direct impact on growth and revenue. What the research found is that 63% of respondents said if they were provided a delightful digital experience, they would be advocates for that brand, and they would give them a high NPS rating as well. However, giving a bad digital experience, more than half of the respondents said they would not be prepared to recommend. And the real concern with that is that in this socially connected world, simply not recommending you could be the least of your concerns if you provide a bad experience. Provide a bad experience now, and the responses that you start to get on forums like Facebook could immediately impact what's being said about your organization. So Stuart, I think you've got some good examples of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a number of examples this year where not understanding or not being able to leverage social media correctly has resulted in some extraordinary negative press for some organizations. I think hashtag Your Taxi, where they launched a campaign sort of was in Victoria to tell your story, fundamentally backfired. The commentary online was extraordinarily negative, and it got to the point that essentially it just became a situation that was almost untenable, where they didn't understand how to influence and how to use that social technology to effect. And that was certainly something that the taxi organization, in trying to compete against Uber, in trying to compete against an organization that does understand social and does understand customer service and advocacy, was a fail. Another example was in Qantas. Qantas did something similar, and essentially, again, it backfired because they didn't understand how to influence these social campaigns. They didn't know how to make sure that they were actually delivering a good customer service, would have resulted in advocacy at the front end. An example I had was a telco client who I bought my mobile phone from. They'd managed to win my business. They'd spent an awful lot of money winning my business and that of my family. But a negative customer experience when I lost my phone in one of the retail stores means that I switched from probably being an advocate to basically being someone who wouldn't recommend that organization moving forward. So maintaining this customer experience through all the channels, whether they're both digital and physical, becomes extraordinarily important. And what we are seeing is that those organizations who are very good at this are seeing huge benefits in terms of dividends, in terms of stock performance, and in terms of bottom line cost savings and also increased sales. So from that perspective, understanding how to manage customer advocacy, how to manage customer experience is one of the fundamental things about being successful in retail these days. And certainly digital is a key portion of that, and understanding how to leverage digital becomes absolutely fundamental to your success. Okay, Jen, over to you.
Thanks, Stuart. And Grant, if we go on to the next slide, what we see is not only is the digital performance impacting impacting advocacy, it's also impacting loyalty directly as well. So again, another key business performance factor. We asked respondents how likely they would be to remain loyal to a brand, continue to use their products and services depending on the quality of digital experience they received. As you can see, delighted consumers were 4 times more likely than unsatisfied to remain loyal to a brand based on the digital experience. And again, we looked at this factor because we know loyalty has a direct impact on revenue. We all know it's much more cost effective to retain an existing customer than try to compete for a new one as well. So, one of the most concerning factors on this slide, though, is that ambivalent factor in the middle, that 34% who said, no, if I get a medium kind of average sort of experience, I'd be willing to change if somebody came along and gave me a better one. So there's a real risk in that, 1/3 of consumers basically, who can very easily be picked off by competitors. And we know that barrier to entry into this retail space and by providing a digital experience is actually pretty low these days. There's no need for bricks and mortar investment. This no longer needs to come from onshore. A lot of the competition in the marketplace here, as those on the phone would know, is coming from the US, UK, increasingly places like Asia. It's coming from disruptors to the market who can enter with a totally different business model. Stuart talked about Uber before. You know, it's basically the world's biggest taxi company that doesn't own any cars. You've got Airbnb, which is the world's biggest hotel company that doesn't actually own any property. And in the retail space, you've got Alibaba, which is one of the world's biggest retailers that doesn't actually hold any stock. So the challenge here is, you know, all of those are based on providing the best digital experience that they possibly can. They're setting the benchmark for how Australian retailers need to compete and need to be able to provide that digital experience. So once we understand, you know, kind of what advocacy and loyalty contributes to that, Stuart has some figures as well about how that overall customer experience impacts business performance. So Grant, if we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so there was an interesting study done by Watermark Consulting last year, where they started to look at, and unfortunately the information does come out of the S&P 500, but it is relevant in terms of what we're seeing over in other markets. Because if we actually look at the retail markets, we would say that the US and Europe are well ahead of Australia in terms of adopting a combined digital and physical strategy and driving customer experience at the front end. And what this report shows is that if you drive customer experience, you are able to see that if we look at the top performing companies within the S&P 500, those who are outperforming in terms of stock price performance, the rest of the market, are those who are driving continual improvements to customer experience, where they have customer experience at their heart. And we're seeing an increase in terms of stock price of around 22.5%, as you can see on the slide. And those who haven't really understood how to address the market or haven't addressed how to get customer experience to drive forward are really lagging behind in terms of stock performance and in terms of overall company performance, down by as much as 46.3%. So this slide just basically says, if you get it right, the business benefits, the benefits to the top line are huge, the benefits to the brand value are enormous, and the benefits to reducing your OPEX cost can be extraordinarily beneficial in terms of driving cost out of your bottom line. And that's all this slide is saying. It's just saying, get it right, benefits are there. So it's worth concentrating on, and there is a dollar value that can be associated with it, even though it is fairly subjective. And Jen, from that point, I'm handing back to you.
Great, thanks, Stuart. So how do organizations get it right? What we've talked about so far is, you know, what the challenge has been, what the business impact of not getting it right has been, and what getting it right can be. Let's look at what actually does constitute a positive digital experience. So Grant, if we could go on to the next slide. We asked those 3,000 consumers as they were ranking all of the digital experiences that they've had, what was it that made that digital experience positive for them? And we looked at this holistically across all of the industries, but we also asked them slightly different, we asked them to rate it by industry as well, because what we understood is that what their expectations are from a bank or an insurance company, for instance, might be different to what they would expect from a retailer. So what I'll share with you is what this retail, non-grocery, so consumer retail looks like. And there are some very specific qualities that consumers prioritize when it comes to having a good digital experience. Okay. So for these, where the difference would be is that really the table stakes for every organization we spoke to, these attributes that sit around, it just works, it's simple to access, I can get to the information I need easily, I can get to the transactional platform I need easily. That is just basic table stakes for every organization in every industry. Where we started to see more priority as well from a retail is that this concept of it fitting into my life seamlessly and effortlessly. And a lot of this comes down to mobile platforms. So retail consumers really want to access products and services anytime, anywhere, on any device. So anytime, sitting on a bus, sitting at work, you know, while they're watching TV at night, they want to be able to easily get to the information that they need. So the next kind of bucket of attributes that were less of a priority but are still up there in terms of what they expect to see is that this kind of understand who I am aspect. So retail consumers these days understand that retailers are gathering considerable amounts of information on them as they do online shopping. They're understanding, what am I buying, where am I located, what are my other buying preferences, what are my payment preferences, you know, am I buying for myself, am I buying for others in my life? And what they expect, knowing that the retailers are gathering that information, is that they're actually doing something with it that provides value back, that they're giving me back experiences that are dedicated to my needs, that they're giving me relevant offers, but walking that fine line of doing that without infringing on privacy. Right? We talk about kind of that creepy line that exists when, you know, you can tell that a retailer has been looking at what you're doing, because all of a sudden, you know, for instance, the ads that pop on the side of your Facebook feeds start to get very tailored to what you've just been doing. So there is that very fine line, and you can see there that it talks about that infringement of privacy. So you need to be very, you know, particularly in this consumer area, need to be very careful about how you use that data, because abusing it is really going to significantly damage the relationship that you have with the consumer. So just to flag, in the next round of research we're going to be doing, we're actually going to drill into this a little bit more. So hopefully in a few months' time we'll be able to share with you to understand where that line is. So the final kind of bucket of attributes where things sit for retailers is really getting into that more of the engagement of the consumer. This is becoming more than a transactional experience for them. It's about giving them a bit more control about interacting and controlling the experience that they're having. And increasingly we're starting to see, and this was starting to get teased out in the focus groups that we did, where they don't think a lot of brands are ready to start really properly predicting the preferences that they have, but they understand that day is coming. So increasingly we're going to see that, you know, understand my needs as a unique individual, predict what I want and push recommendations out to me is going to become more and more common and more expected by consumers as they go out and they consume different services. Stuart, I think you've got some examples here of some customers we're working with where we're addressing some of these attributes.
Yeah, I think most of our customers that we're working with are trying to address some of the attributes. But if we start to look at those who are doing it successfully and have understood that essentially contextual, personalized, and involved customers spend more and are more loyal, are organizations like General Pants or Burberry or Nespresso and these organizations, if we look at, for example, the ability to now interlink their physical and digital and start to interlink things like they're sitting on a couch in the afternoon and deciding that they want to purchase a specific set of clothing, but then being able to go and book an appointment and try it on at lunchtime at a time that suits, and having that clothing be in the actual physical store, and having someone know that you're turning up, and all of a sudden then you can start to tie back your marketing solutions. So we're seeing organizations starting to see the digital play as being qualified leads for those foot traffic that's going into the physical store. And using those qualified leads to now know that I'm going to be walking into your store at a specific time. If I'm walking in a specific time, you know what I'm interested in buying, so therefore you can do cross-sell and upsell in terms of accessories that I might also be interested in. And it means that also your store assistants now start to have the same quality of information about the products that I've been able to see on your website. And so it's providing those in-store assistants with the same level of product information, the same ability to provide endless aisle, in other words, multiple access to your inventory. It's being able to personalize that experience when I come into the store. And what we're seeing is those who are getting this right are seeing mammoth footfall increases as they tie together the two experiences. Burberry, for example, they've taken it even a step further, to the point that you can actually start to design your trench coats. Now, if you can personalize and design your trench coat online, You can then get to the point that you have an in-store fitting, and you can book that in-store fitting and go and try on the trench coat that you've designed online. And so you're starting to become involved in designing the look and feel of those trench coats. It's got to the point that Domino's Pizza, for example, locally, you can design your own pizza. You can not only design your own pizza, but if you actually launch that on the Domino's store and you get sales, then you benefit from 1% of those sales. So we're seeing this interlink between not only the physical and digital, but also the social experience and the advocacy that we're seeing in terms of when you tie in the intimacy and the personalization of the experience that they have with those brands. So I would say that some of our Australian counterparts are certainly getting there. I would say a lot of our global counterparts are well and truly ahead of the curve. And we're in a very fortunate position where we actually don't need to have a crystal ball to see what's coming down the road. All we need to do is actually get a ticket and go to the US or go to Europe, and which a lot of us are actually doing on our holidays anyway, to see what other organizations are doing, and then start to apply those same principles down here in Australia. But if we can start to see the blurring between the online and the offline, if we can start to address some of the organizational changes that need to occur to be successful, if we can break down the barriers that essentially have already been created within organizations to be able to get consistency of experience, both from digital to physical, then you start to see huge benefits in terms of incremental sales and obviously top-line revenue gains. And so from that perspective, I was then going to go on, so if we can go to the next slide, and talk about Burberry maybe in a little bit more detail. Jen, I'll hand back to you.
Great, thanks, Stuart. So we've talked about the challenge, we've talked about the impact on business, we've talked about what actually makes a delightful customer experience. As I said, it's the challenge is not quite being met just yet in the Australian marketplace, but there are things that organizations can start to do, that retailers can start to do to start addressing this. So we've looked at what the attributes are, what the priorities are for consumers, and as we've gone out and we've discussed this with our customers and with some of our prospects, and we've discussed this even with, as I said, Suncorp Insurance, which is the only organization that achieved the positive score, tried to dig into, well, what are they doing that is different, and how have they approached their digital experience, and how has that resulted in a better score and happier consumers. And what we found is that there are 6 key things that need to be addressed around improvements being made in the digital experience. So I'll hand back to Stuart, and he can kind of take you through what those 6 are one by one and give you some examples of how organizations are addressing some of those.
Yeah, I think, so if we start to talk about consistency, we're talking about the necessity to essentially have a consistent experience no matter which channel you touch. That means not only from a pricing structure, that also means from the need to get the basics right, to make sure that the look and feel is the same, to make sure that the same product information is available. And this is not just only in pure retail, this also goes across B2B, banking, etc. In other words, you want to be able to make sure that if you're sitting on the couch on a Sunday afternoon and looking at an insurance product, for example, that the pricing that's available to you and the quote that you're able to generate online would be the same as if you picked up the phone to the customer service agent, and would be exactly the same as if you walked into one of their physical stores. And ensuring that you have that consistent pricing across the organization drives customer experience. Because you imagine if you're a stakeholder or a customer who's walking in and gets a different price online, they walk in and they speak to a customer service agent, they get a totally different price through the customer service agent, or even different details or information about that product that they may be inquiring about, and then walk into a physical store and they know more than the store assistant, then that doesn't deliver a very good, consistent customer experience. And if we go to the next one is simplicity. Simplicity is talking about getting the basics right, making sure that you have access to the tools quickly and efficiently, no matter where you touch the organization, no matter which channel you engage with. And what we're seeing is that organizations don't have the ability now to control the way customers come through certain channels. So it needs to be simple.
Hello, Stuart, are you there? It looks like we may have lost Stuart. Jennifer, do you want to take over for a second?
That my specific pricing structure should be different. You know if I'm interested in certain products before I even get to the store. So simplicity and consistency become extraordinarily important. Insight. Insight is something that there are huge amounts of data now that they're available in most retail organizations. And this data is only ever increasing. What we see is organizations are struggling to understand how to read or how to leverage this data. And that's becoming a bit of both a benefit and an issue. If you do understand how to leverage this data, you're able to understand where I am contextually, what I'm up to, what I'm interested in, when it's my birthday, when it's my wife's birthday. You're able to leverage that data and tie that together with your front-end channels to start to personalize that experience when I touch your brand. Whether that's walking into a store and a customer service agent saying, "Hello, Stuart, nice to have you back. Understand that you're interested in these products that you've thrown into your like basket. That's one of your websites, and you personalize the experience because you know I'm only interested in certain products, or within that certain product set that I've been looking at certain products in the past." This data becomes extraordinarily important, and how to look at what I need when. Speed. Table stakes these days. Everyone expects a very quick, fast, dynamic website. Everyone expects the information to be correct. Everyone hates the blue screen of death that you make it, or that 404 information or documentation that you get when all of a sudden the website goes down. People are unwilling to sit on a website and wait for hours and hours. As you know, people hate standing in queues. They even hate more not being able to get that to happen quickly online. So it needs to be quick. It needs to be up to date. And it also, if I walk into one of your physical stores and I've done a click and collect, I need to be dealt with quickly. I need to have a store assistant who knows that I've ordered something and who knows how special I am and are going to deal with me. You need to be able to analyze the data in real time to be able to respond from a marketing perspective. So you can change the website's look and feel. You can make it contextual. You can personalize it to my situation or where I am. An example would be I'm on a sporting store and I've been leveraging this sporting store on a regular basis in Australia. However, I've traveled to the US, so there's no point in positioning to me board shorts and surfboards, because I'm actually in the US and I'm actually going to be interested in ski wear and ski jackets. So making sure that you have that data, you're able to make on-the-fly decisions about what to present becomes extraordinarily valuable from a marketing perspective and a marketing sense. And also understanding that you can now not just do sort of shotgun marketing where you send out an email campaign and it just ends up in my deleted items. You know, if you're starting to leverage click and collect and tie that information together, you'll know where I'll be, you know what I'm interested in, and you know me as a qualified lead when I walk into your store. So being able to leverage that, and that has to be dynamic. It has to change according to my circumstance. It has to be capable of delivering information that I need. It has to allow me to interact with the brand if I want to interact with the brand. And therefore, you need to be very good at being able to manage those social tools and those responses. The interactive tools need to be, intuitive. They can't be complex. As I said, you need to be the fastest and easiest to do business with. Easy is important. General Pants is looking at in-store kiosks. They've got the ability to take away the need to always go to that front store and be able to leverage that store assistant at the front store. You can go to a kiosk. You can get the same rich media information that you've spent a lot of money getting online. Now it's available in store. So if I'm looking for something around a specific set of shoes or a specific set of jeans, it's there and easy. And if I want to transact then and there and not actually go to the store assistant at the front end because there's a mammoth queue, then I can do that. And so where we're seeing leveraging digital and physical in a physical environment, which makes it far easier for me to and accessibility, true omni-commerce. We see a lot of organizations struggling with omni-commerce, and this is because omni-commerce at the end of the day just means multi-channel. It means anywhere, anytime, when I want to interact with your brand. It means if you actually do true omni-channel, that there is the elimination of the silos that we have typically built within our organizations around our digital, our customer service, maybe even our sales organization. Those barriers need to disappear for us to be successful. And so being able to provide the accessibility and the interaction between those means that if I want to engage with your brand at 12 o'clock at night on a Sunday evening, I can. You need to make sure that when I want to interact with your brand, I do it the way I want to, where I want to, and how I want to. There was an example that turned up in it was actually a B2B organizations, where they felt that their actual value to the end user was that relationship they have between their customer service agents and their front-end customers. And what they found and what they were scared of doing was that by going online, they were going to cannibalize that relationship. What they actually found was the opposite was true. By providing the digital channel, what they were enabling people to do was interact with their organization the way they wanted to, when they wanted to. And they actually found that it didn't actually change the relationship with the customers. It meant that they were probably doing their own, and then validating that decision with a customer service agent who might have more information about specific product or how that product went together with something else. And so what we saw is that by providing the ability for customers to engage with the brand the way they want to, when they want to, that there were specific increases in benefits, and they actually saw their bottom line operations costs reduced by 5%, and their top line sales increased by 10%. And that's essentially me done, Jen. I'm going to hand back to yourself.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. And Grant, for the sake of time, why don't we just skip to the final slide with the details to download the research. Yeah, thank you. So as Grant said, each of you will be receiving a copy of this research paper that we've done. It goes into an enormous amount more depth than what we've been able to cover on here. Talks about different types of consumers and the different types of experiences that they have based on how social they are, how digitally engaged they are. And we get a little bit more into the details around those different attributes that contribute to a successful digital experience as well, and some recommendations. Okay, so more than happy to have a discussion with you and offline, but I think we can open it up to Q&A now.
Absolutely, Jennifer, and thanks to both you and Stuart for an excellent presentation. I certainly learned a great deal, and yeah, some really great insights into the state of the consumer mindset with regard to a digital experience. We do have a few questions coming through, and those who are still listening in, please feel free to put your questions in the dialogue box now. So we've got one from Michelle to start with. I suppose the narrow focus on maximising satisfaction in each channel through consistency, etc., can create a distorted picture, suggesting customers are happier with the company than they actually are. In other words, touch points matter, but it's the full journey that really counts. This is more of a statement, I guess, than a question, but we'll get your opinion on it. It's generally not emphasised enough because vendors are not equipped with the knowledge to frame it properly, i.e. it's not a technology problem. What's your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, Michelle's point is absolutely right. We talked about that end-to-end and actually how important some of that last mile attribute is. You can provide a great, kind of browsing experience, online shopping experience, easy transaction. If the delivery fails, if you have a bad experience and how that, kind of finally gets to you, then that's going to impact the entire experience overall, just your perception of the brand, not just whether or not they're giving you a good digital experience, but it might impact your overall loyalty to whether or not you're going to visit them in store or just go to another competitor. So it's even looking for retailers particularly, so you need to make sure the product availability is there, so the upfront perspective of that and understanding, giving all the way through to delivery and the supply chain partners you use, and make sure that they are providing a consistently good experience as well.
All right, another one. Kate asks for the opinion on the top 3 Australian brands, and perhaps maybe even a global view from you, Jennifer, but that are best approaching integrated marketing, so digital and physical content marketing, that's shown the best impact on the business gross profit. So who's doing it well, essentially?
Oh, do you want me to take that one, Jen, or do you want to go?
Yeah, you can go. And what I might chime in there are 1 or 2 things that Suncorp is doing particularly well that are probably worthwhile calling out.
Well, why don't you talk to Suncorp first, and then I'll talk about retail.
Okay. So one of the things that we found with Suncorp, when they approached their digital experience, they really did a whole revamp of it around the again, online full end-to-end experience. So for an insurance company particularly, and that kind of expands into different brands, for them that full online experience goes all the way from that initial purchase all the way through to claims experience. And that claims experience is what really is the undoing of a brand if it's done badly. One of the main things they did was when they started out, they didn't just look at that upfront experience. They looked right across every single part of the organization. They brought together a team of people who were responsible for all of those different processes and basically started from scratch in terms of looking how that happened. But overall, they put one group and one individual responsible for that customer experience end to end. So somebody who has full oversight to make sure that that online shopping experience, that online purchase of the insurance product was just as good as the online claims experience that they had. So it's somebody responsible, single point responsible for that full end-to-end piece. The other thing they did is when they looked to build out the technology that underpinned that solution, they, again, did not just patch it together. They had a lot of legacy systems in place, but they actually put the effort into rebuilding whole systems and redoing some business processes to go along with that, so that there was that full end-to-end visibility of the performance that they were providing, and that there was that full oversight. Finally, they did a lot of work to break down the silos in their organization, so that they could share data and information about the interactions that they were having with the customers and get that single customer view. So they could do analytics around it, they could do some predictive work around it, and they could actually, when somebody called up and said, hey, I need home and contents insurance, they would say, okay, well, we already know that you're home and contents owner, we can give you, or you're already a boat insurer, we can give you a deal. And we already can see that you've had no claims, and so you're a good driver, so we're going to give you a bonus. So really those were kind of the 3 things that they did differently that suggested that they were getting a much better performance rating than some of the others.
Okay.
So, I would add to the fact that the big issue is not technology these days. The technology will do what you need to do, but often organizational change is one of the largest challenges to confront. We're seeing that traditional business models, such as the co-op business model, struggles in this dynamic world where barriers to entry are extraordinarily low, where owning the customer data becomes important so that you can market to it, where being able to change compensation plans and how you actually compensate different stores. So there's a lot of organizational change that needs to go in line to be successful. I wouldn't want to start saying, giving you my opinion of what sites I think are doing it really well, but I will talk, so I won't give you a top 3. I'll just talk about maybe 3 brands who are starting to address some of the problems. I've seen Lorna Jane obviously get their physical and their digital stores working well together. They're starting to address some of the internal issues in terms of online and offline revenue. And what we see is that organizations who sit there and say, actually, it's just revenue, it's not online and offline, and there's no cannibalization, etc., are doing very well. H&M are doing a brilliant job, but they've only just really come into the Australian market here. They've done a very good job elsewhere in the world, having virtual changing rooms and being able to allow customers to engage. But there are a lot of retailers who are starting to approach it now, but they are starting to deal with some of the internal issues in terms of organizational change that needs to occur to support this customer-centric approach. That's me done.
All right. One final one. I think we'll be wrapping it up and let everyone get to lunch. But just in terms of what you're finding now, I think you've been presenting this to a few people. How are businesses responding when you open their eyes to this research? Are they, yeah, bit of a chuckle. So let me know how businesses are interpreting it, and are the lights going on in terms of what the impact is on their business?
Go on, Jen.
To some degree, it's dependent on industry. So one of the industries we haven't shared widely, we actually did look at government somewhat separately. It did not rate well, and so they were not surprised. They know they've got a long way to go. Same with the utility industries. Those we've spoken to were very upfront about the fact saying this really had not been a lot of the priority for them. It's really only now that you see more privatization, you see more competition in the retail space, that they're starting to understand that they need to offer a more engaging experience. The banks, there's a combination, they know they've been obviously investing a significant amount of money in this area, and they have huge teams focused on this area. So they were, I guess, a little bit disappointed in where they ranked, but they also know that particularly around that concept of breaking down silos within organizations, that they have a long way to go. Because if you think about the big banks as well, they've got so many different teams that are sitting on so many different legacy systems that it really is hard to get that end-to-end customer view. So that's one of the things that they really are prioritizing, doing a lot of work there to be able to bring those data sets together to be able to do analytics around them. But they're investing very heavily in the front end. So, we're talking to quite a few of the big banks around the marketing programs they do, and how we, even if the back-end systems don't necessarily reflect it, how do we present a consistent front to the customer? How do we engage them from a marketing perspective much better? Insurance companies as well starting to put a lot more focus on that, and understand that they have a long way to go to be able to really make it work. Some of the retailers that we've spoken to as well, this is absolutely top priority for them. They understand the competition, they understand the disruptive nature of the marketplace right now, and so they're prioritizing this significantly, and has visibility of it right up to board level.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is in the rest of the world, as much as 30% of their actual revenue is influenced by or is currently going through digital channels. Whereas in Australia, in the retail sector specifically, it's more like 2 to 5%. Yeah. And that change is rapidly approaching the Australian market, which means a lot of the retailers who are starting to see their counterparts in Europe and the US see huge amounts of their revenue being influenced or going through digital channels, are starting to make mammoth investments and starting to address some of the internal change that needs to occur. We are seeing that in Australia, when I do talk to executive boards about where they need to be spending their budgets and assisting them in terms of what digital actually means and where they might need to build budgets for the coming year, we are seeing a slow shift, but it is still a battle here in Australia to get the acknowledgement of how important this is. And in the US, they almost got to the point that it's not a question of going digital anymore. It's a question of how is digital part of their core business and how it relates. And so they're investing huge amounts of money now into those areas. And Australia really needs to play catch up, or we're going to run into real problems over the next 5 years where some organizations struggle to actually have a business anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and that's probably where I was going with that question to a certain degree. When online retail is perceived to account for such a small amount of revenue, it doesn't get the weighting that it does in other countries. But I think brands, as you say, first of all, they're going to see a significant percentage of sales starting to come from the digital channel in coming years, but also the influence it has on the overall business can't be understated in terms of the digital experience. And what we're seeing here with your research is that it has an impact on the overall business that can't be ignored as well. All right,
Agreed.
I think we'll finish up there, guys. It's just on 12 p.m. now, and so thanks everyone for sticking through what I thought was an excellent webinar. Thanks to Jennifer and Stuart for presenting that today. We'll have a video up in the coming days on Power Retail, and thanks again everyone for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.